Whoa, hey there, kids. It's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I'm not advertising anything. I just noticed you seem to really like the long videos. So I just wanted to tell you that there's actually a live stream going on right now. It's actually live as you've clicked on this video and you're listening to me. Well, it's live right now on my YouTube channel. If you check it out, it's Creepypasta stories for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It never stops. It's literally thousands of stories. So, yeah, I'm going to let you get to the most epic series on the channel. But don't forget, okay? It should be at that little eye in the top corner. Bye. The following maintenance requests and complaints were found on the computer of one Mrs. Doris May, the landlord of the apartment building in 2616 Wayne Boulevard. Following the thorough search of the building by police, Donald Fitzgerald, Unit 411, January 13th. My wife and I moved here for the proximity to the subway and for the cheap rent, but we did not move here so that we wouldn't have a working stove. I do not plan on eating takeout for the remainder of my tenure at this building. I demand maintenance come down at once and fix this. Unacceptable. January 24th. And now the refrigerator isn't working. The refrigerator temperature should be at a nice, cool 34 degrees Fahrenheit, but try as we might, Patricia and I have been unable to get it below 36 degrees. So now our milk is spoiled, the cheese is molded, my yogurt is inedible, and my beers are not chilled the way that I'd like it to be when I get home from a long day at work. Once again, I demand a maintenance representative to be here tomorrow to fix this, and not the same man as last time. Jose was rude and did not even apologize for all of this inconvenience when we yelled at him. February 8th. It seems we cannot go a single day without finding something unacceptable about this building. At night, both Patricia and I hear a faint but constant thumping in the walls. What is this? I demand to know why we cannot get some peace and quiet. February 12th. If our Wi-Fi drops out in the middle of Patricia's stories one more time, there will be hell to pay. Get the ISP down here now to increase our speeds. This is insane. February 18th. It appears my previous demand went unheeded. Last night, the thumping was far worse. It sounds like a ghost is living in the walls. Patricia hates ghosts. They are rude and uninvited and do nasty things like slam doors and break china dishes. Get a job, ghosts! Patricia can't sleep in these conditions, and I hereby demand an exorcist be brought to the premises to deal with this at once. At once! February 28th. The refrigerator is acting up again. I thought this was fixed. The expiration date on my milk says March 3rd, but it is not March 3rd yet, and already my milk is starting to smell. The temperature is 36 degrees and rising. Unacceptable. March 4th. So today I came home from work, and I go to hang up my coat, and what did I find? A bouquet of flowers from the downstairs office, thanking us for being dream tenants who always pay rent on time? No! I find a cold spot by the bedroom door. The air is of an acceptable but not ideal temperature throughout our apartment. But by the door to our bedroom, there is a cold spot. This indicates the presence of a spiritual entity, and I do not pay $1,800 a month to be haunted in my own home. Unacceptable. I demand this be dealt with at once. At once. March 4th. Thank you for fixing the stove. But I do not appreciate how Jose made me feel stupid for not knowing about the pilot light feature. I expect he will be reprimanded appropriately. March 11th. Yesterday I had a run-in with Paul Shummerman from down the hall. He was very rude to me when I asked him to stop staring at us venomously whenever we see him. Do you know what he did? He continued to stare as if he wishes harm upon me. I demand to know what will be done about Paul Shummerman. March 14th. So apparently it's not just Paul Shummerman who is bizarre and rude. Rosa Martinez, the elderly foreign woman with maybe 5 or 6 remaining teeth from floor 3, smiled at us in a very evil-looking way that I did not appreciate when I was getting our mail. I demand to know what will be done about Rosa Martinez. March 14th. I know I just submitted a request, but it is 10:45, and Patricia is unable to sleep because of her nightmares. She says she can see a black figure standing at the end of our bed with red eyes. Not okay. Was someone murdered in this unit? Answers. March 16th. It is unacceptable that on James Madison's birthday, we cannot get the heat to stay on. The temperature is at 40 degrees. Much too cold. Fix it. March 17th. Still too cold. And do you mind explaining why all the pictures of Patricia and myself in our hallway were smashed and broken on the ground? I'm calling an exorcist since you refuse to do so, and rent will be reduced by the costs of his services. March 19th. We brought in a local priest who says that, guess what? It is not a ghost. It is a demon. A demon infests my humble abode as I write this. Do you think this is an acceptable way to run an apartment? No. No, it is not. I ask what we can do about this situation, and he says we should leave immediately, because if we don't, the demon will latch onto us and follow us around. I am not relocating this soon. I asked him to deal with it, and he said he can't, that it's beyond his ability to fight, and that we need to have the entire building fully blessed. He then scheduled a time tomorrow for he and several other priests, rabbis, and pastors to arrive and do a thorough blessing of the building. You will be billed for this. March 19th. Once again, I cannot sleep. Patricia is sleepwalking, yet again, except instead of walking down the hall or screaming while still asleep from the kitchen, she is crawling on the ceiling and shouting at me in a very deep voice while her head twists fully around like an owl. I told her to get down at once, and she said, no, she is mine. Excuse me, demon, she is not. I have work in the morning. But what I do not have is patience for this nonsense. Oh, and when I told the demon to let us sleep, it said, F me. F me? I do not appreciate that kind of language. No, sir. Then she began hissing and spitting steaming piles onto the bed and laughing maniacally. My blanket is ruined. I am typing this on my laptop from the couch while she shouts blasphemies from down the hall. If these priests do not fix this issue, we will be reporting you for this mess. March 20th. Do you mind explaining to me why there are herbs and twigs by my door beneath a sign of a pentagram? I expect this is the work of Paul Shummerman or Rosa Martinez, or that nasty Dylan French from Unit 221. You need to do a better job picking tenants for this establishment. March 20th. So I come inside and Patricia's gone. Her absence was not arranged beforehand, and I expect it to be something to do with the demon. This is not okay. When I come home from work, I expect to be able to relax in front of a game show with a beer while my wife knits. But that's not going to be the case today, apparently. There are scratched pentagrams all over the walls, broken lamps, the lights don't work, the refrigerator door is hanging open, thus ruining yet more milk gone. And the entire apartment is freezing. I will be doing a thorough search through this building for my wife, updating you on any unpleasantries I encounter from my phone as needed. And when I get back, I expect Jose will have fixed the lights. March 20th. It appears these tenants knew I was coming. I am on floor 3. They're all standing outside their homes, watching me, silently, unmoving, as I walk down the hallway between them, and I believe I smell marijuana from the gay couple's home. Marijuana, an illegal drug that kills millions every year, in your building. Do something about this. I will not have the devil's ganja so close to my abode. If the police conduct a SWAT raid looking for marijuana, we all go to federal prison. All of us. March 20th. I have decided I cannot abide the presence of such a terrifying drug as marijuana anywhere near my person, my wife, or my place of residence. I have alerted the authorities, and they are en route. I apologize if a life sentence for you is inconvenient, but I had no other choice. March 20th. So I asked sweet Mrs. Robinson from 334 where my wife was. She said the basement. The basement! I go down there for laundry. Not my wife. Also, I hereby and henceforth demand that a washer-dryer unit, preferably stacked, although I am willing to negotiate on this, be placed in our unit when this unfortunate episode is concluded. I do not like going into the basement with a basket of dirty laundry, twice or 3 times a month, because I have to use the stairs, because you can't get the elevator working. March 20th. Why are the lights off on floor 2, and where are the priests? All I see are more tenants pointing in unison down the stairs while staring at me like they're in some kind of trance. It smells like rotten corpses and old food down here, maybe old lasagna. This was not the case when I left for work this morning, although, to be fair, I simply walked down the stairs and did not venture down this hallway. I also did not notice the arrows painted in blood pointing downstairs. I assume those were put up while I was at work. March 20th. I misspelled the word "to," and to be fair, my apologies. March 20th. Where's the front door? I am on floor 1, and the front door is missing. I just used it. Instead, there's just a swirling vortex of impenetrable blackness with blood coming out of it and staining the nice carpet. I expect this to be fixed, as I have work tomorrow, and I need to be there early so I can prepare for a presentation on sales reports for quarter 1. Quarter 1! March 20th. I have now reached the door to the basement. Why is the word "come" scratched completely into the wood here? It's unsightly. March 20th. I'm at the top of the basement stairs. Do you know there are demonic voices whispering to people down here, saying, "Come down the stairs with us. Join us, join us, join us," over and over again. Why do they feel the need to repeat themselves? It is inefficient. March 20th. The voices are now saying that the gospel is a lie, but I said nothing about the first 4 books of the New Testament. This is an irrelevant red herring, and I demand that we replace these demons with one that can at least stay on topic. I am here for my wife, and not to debate the minutiae of Judeo-Christian theology with malevolent spiritual entities who, if I'm being perfectly honest, cannot be trusted on the matter because they clearly have a vested interest in me feeling one way or the other as far as the subject is concerned, and thus not being objective. If this keeps up, then I will be taking my laundry to the laundry mat down the block and charter for the foreseeable future, and you will lose out on my business in that department. March 20th. Well, I now see where the priests have gone. Their bones are scattered across the basement, and their collective blood is swirling in a vortex around what appears to be a portal to hell, in the center of the basement, around which all of the tenants of the ground floor are seated and worshiping. I believe I said very clearly that I did not want hell portals in my place of residence, and no one seemed to indicate this would be a problem when I signed the lease. If I am ever to use these washing and drying machines again, I expect the gateway to Hades to be closed and the place to be cleaned thoroughly before I do so. The smell is terrible, and I also demand that the glowing fiery pentagram on the floor beneath the portal to be doused and cleaned off. It is detrimental to what little decor there is in this basement. March 20th. All the tenants now see me, but as of this typing, have yet to respond to my demands to see my wife. They are simply staring at me, and I'm sorry. Where are their eyes? Are eyes not fashionable anymore? How can they see me if they have no eyes? This is impossible, and I demand they cease it at once. They have no respect for the rules of either this apartment or physics itself. This day is ruined. March 20th. My wife, who is quite unkempt and whose hair appears to be unwashed and looks like she is possessed with Satan, which is unacceptable, has joined the group as they speak to me in unison. I'm sorry, when was there a group practice for this performance, and why was I not invited? It is quite rude to exclude members of your own apartment from such group activities as theater and Latin classes, apparently. And also, I assume this strange deep voice that they're singing in belongs to the towering horned beast that has stepped through the portal and is pointing clawed fingers at me and approaching me slowly in aggressive manners that I do not appreciate. Who is he? Does he pay rent? Do you let anyone enter this building even if they don't pay rent? And if so, then I demand hereby, henceforth, and at once, by the power vested in me as a lawful citizen and as a resident of this apartment who is not, nor ever has been delinquent on the payment of rent nor any other agreed upon expenses, that At first, I didn't think anything of it. My neighbor would stop to chat with me, leash in hand, and I would catch glimpses of the metal slider dangling from its belly. I assumed it was wearing a piece of pet clothing, or that perhaps it was the byproduct of some awkward veterinary procedure. But the more we chatted, and the more I saw this mysterious zipper, the more I realized it was out of the ordinary. Clearly embedded in the dog's skin. It drew my attention away every time we engaged in small talk until finally one day, I decided to ask about it. Say, what's that zipper for on the little guy's belly anyway? Oh, that? It's a long story. I wouldn't want to bore you. Oh, no, I've got nothing but time. I wonder if she could see the beads of sweat forming above my brow. Really, it's nothing. It's just a safety measure. And that was it. She pretty much laughed it off, granting me little in the way of an explanation. Thinking back, her responses were downright vague and deflective. She could see how curious I was. Why not just tell me? And what exactly did she mean by safety measure? As unfruitful as our conversation was, I didn't press the matter any further. Days, weeks, months went by. I would occasionally see the dog's strange cosmetic feature, but I brushed it off every time, knowing it would only haunt me if I dwelled on it. Still, the thought itched in the back of my mind. It wasn't until a few months had passed that I would finally have the nerve to scratch it. I was pulling up weeds near my fence when I looked over to the neighbor's place, noticing the dog lying on the back porch. A stray cat wandered by, as often happened in our neighborhood, without so much as a warning growl or malicious stance. The dog trotted over to the cat and scarfed it down. The sound of sharp teeth colliding with bone. The cat screeched in agony, and then there was no more. In a minute flat, its entire body was devoured. I was in shock. The cat's cries alerted my neighbor to the situation. She raced outside, grabbed the dog by the collar, and pulled him into the house. Through the sliding door, it was tough to make out, but I swear, she unzipped him and reached inside, seemingly adjusting one of his organs. He didn't flinch, not even a bit. After pulling her arm out, the dog dropped to the floor, dead as a doornail. She then carried him outside and placed him back on the porch, arranging him into a sleeping position before getting in her car and leaving for the day. This 5-minute span of visual information was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. Words like gruesome, strange, and horrific are too tame to describe what I saw. I was appalled beyond measure. After the shock wore off, I hopped the fence and I approached the dog's carcass. I felt its neck. Cold to the touch, no pulse. I looked to its underside. There it was. The godforsaken zipper in all of its mysterious glory. I felt kind of bad for the dog dying. I had to know what that damn thing was for. I needed an explanation for not only the dog's, but my neighbor's odd behavior just moments ago. I slowly unzipped the dog's belly, placating my curiosity with a satisfying sound of metal sliding against metal. I spread each side of the opening with my hands and peered in, divulging the animal's inner workings. What I saw was absolutely dumbfounding. My neighbor's dog was animatronic. There were wirings, gears, a tank where its stomach should have been, the whole 9 yards. It didn't make any sense, but there it was, staring back from behind the zipper. After scurrying back home in shock, I decided that my best course of action would be to call animal control. I could tell them my neighbor's dog trespassed on my lawn and was attacking the neighbor's cat. They'd show up, examine the robotic carcass, and then go from there. I knew there wasn't a protocol for that sort of thing, but I assumed that they could take care of things and contact the appropriate people, whether it be the police, the government, the National Enquirer. As long as the weird predicament was taken care of, I could sleep easy, knowing that my neighbor's strange robot dog wasn't going anywhere, eating whatever it pleased. That's simple, right? Nope. Far from it. Animal control took a while to get there. By the time they arrived, my neighbor had come home and disposed of the evidence, hiding the dog somewhere in her home. The animal control officer apologized for the misunderstanding and left, leaving my neighbor on her front porch, glaring in my direction. It appeared privacy meant nothing to the local authorities. Just my luck. The days that followed were different. My neighbor's dog had sprung to life, reactivated by its master, no doubt. They would walk their usual path around the cul-de-sac, but wouldn't stop for small talk. I knew her dirty little secret, after all. I was no longer a friendly neighbor to be conversed with. Oh no, I was an enemy, a danger to this woman's unusual way of life. Even if I meant no harm to her, or her strange choice of pet, she didn't seem to see it that way. She continued to give me the cold shoulder for about a month and a half before finally speaking with me again on one of her daily strolls. Hey there. Hey there. Hello? Everything all right? Just peachy. I'm having a cookout on Saturday afternoon. You're more than welcome to come. That's strange. We weren't on speaking terms for over a month, and now I suddenly was invited over? Maybe this was her extending an olive branch my way. Her way of saying no hard feelings. Yeah, sure, I can make it. It sounds like a good time. Great, I'll add you to the list. As she walked away, I felt the need to apologize. Even if her dog was a weird, cat-eating robot. Hey, about that animal control call, I wanted to say, don't worry about it. Water under the bridge. See you Saturday. She hurried off home, and that was that. Problem solved. Or so I thought. The night before the cookout, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing what sounded like footsteps creeping around the perimeter of my house. Every time I got up to investigate, the sound ceased. The coast appeared to be clear. It was either a prank at my expense or a burglar taking their sweet time to pull the trigger, or ghosts roaming around the night. Either way, it left me anxious, making sleep a distant dream just out of reach. During a particularly loud set of footsteps, I raced downstairs just in time to catch 4 glowing dots peering in through my living room window. This was enough to make my neck hairs stand upright. Though terrified, I wasted no time grabbing a baseball bat and storming out my front door to greet the would-be intruders. I may be old, but I can still kick some ass when needed, especially when it involves crossing my property line. But in my astonishment, my yard was empty. I covered every side of the house, only to find no one. Not a soul in sight in any direction. I don't care how fast you can sprint, nobody could have made it out of eyeshot in such a short period of time, even in those low-light conditions. Baffled, even more anxious than before, I locked up every last door and window in my home before crawling under the covers like a frightened child, scared of the mystery figures lurking in the shadows. The footsteps dissipated over the course of the night, and the sun came up over the horizon. So too did my fear. My waking nightmare had ended, but not before putting a weary, sleep-deprived frame of mind in its place. In a sluggish slur of movement, I grudgingly made my way to my neighbor's house around noon, ready as I would ever be for the neighborhood to get together. Oddly enough, there were no cars in the driveway, aside from her own. I wondered if I got the date wrong, but after knocking on the door, she greeted me with a smile and rushed me into the house. We exchanged pleasantries, and she sat me down to the bar stool in the kitchen. After a few moments of awkward silence, I mustered up the courage to ask about the elephant in the room. So, where is everybody? You're already here, silly. I tilted my head, puzzled. What about everybody else? There is no one else. You're the only person I invited. All at once, the pieces clicked into place. I felt stupid for not realizing it sooner. Her sudden kindness, the noises the night before. There was no cookout. There was never any cookout. I was in the middle of a trap, lured in largely due to my own idiocy. I could have guessed something sinister was going on the moment I unzipped that dog. So, what happens now? You'll see. Just sit tight. I quickly jumped up from the chair and turned towards the door. With any inhuman speed, she bolted in front of me, a large kitchen knife in hand. Not so fast. Intimidated by her fluid motions and firm stance. We need to talk. About what? I knew exactly what. Don't play dumb with me. And that's when I noticed it. On her chest, peeking through the top of her blouse, I would have missed it had the sunlight been coming through the window, not danced across its metal. She had a zipper too. Stricken to my core with fear, my gaze was interrupted by an angry hand gesture. My eyes are up here. The moments that ensued are a bit fuzzy, but I can only guess that I was knocked out or chloroformed. As I awoke strapped to a chair in a new room. Given the staircase, I assumed that it was in her basement, though this realization didn't help me any. I attempted to break free of my restraints, but it was no use. Unless she would free me herself. I was fastened to that chair for life. In absence of mobility, I decided to give that place a once-over. The staircase was to my left, and a concrete wall to my right, but directly in front of me was a workstation, complete with a dozen computers. This is where my neighbor sat, a USB cord snaking out of her unzipped chest, typing away at a blinding rate. Her motives were still unclear to me. Though confined to the one view, I was able to turn my neck enough in both directions to form a decent picture of what was behind me. It was a wall of cages, each housing an identical copy of her dog. They didn't move, not even in the slightest, likely just as animatronic as she was. What on God's green earth had I stumbled into? Just then, my neighbor ripped the cord from her chest and walked over to me. "Ah, you're awake! Did you have a nice nap?" I refused to reply, looking her up and down in disgust, trying to make out what this thing was that was speaking to me. "What's the matter? Dog got your tongue?" I remained silent in lieu of her taunting. That's all right. You just need to listen. Sit tight. I'll be right back. She walked over to her workstation and grabbed something before reclaiming her spot in front of me. I've worked too hard in this location to have you screwing things up on me. Then again, it's my own fault. I was careless. I never should have left my core on the porch like that. I assumed she was talking about the dog. I want you to look at this. She placed the object at eye level. It was a badge of sorts, upon which was a logo that read, Synthetech. I am an android. I work for a large company, moving from location to location, gathering specific information that is crucial to our initiative. You can't know anything about that. Hell, you already know far too much. I hadn't noticed it at first, but she seemed to keep playing with her zipper. I am so sick of this fucking meat suit. Before my very eyes, she removed her clothing and unzipped herself down to the groin. In the most unnatural way possible, she slid out of her own skin, revealing to me her true form. She was nothing but a pile of electronics pieced together in a human shape. It was a strange sight, nauseating in every sense of the word. The way she moved and spoke like this was downright sickening. Can't say anymore, but I want you to know that our work is necessary. If you were to speak these truths to the world above, you would be jeopardizing everything we've accomplished. You have to submit to our intentions and see that they are just. I didn't know what to make of this. I simply looked away, wishing not to see her grotesque, animatronic face anymore. Unfortunately for me, she grabbed it and forced it in my direction. A feeling of cold metal enveloped my jaw. You need to promise that you will submit. You are not to tell anyone of any of this. You understand? I nodded in agreement, but only because I wanted her hand off my face. Luckily, she let go and backed away. Good. You know, we're not so bad when you get to know us. In a sense, we're just like you. Internally, I scoffed at the thought of this. I was nothing like her, not just because of her appearance. I was never one to go around kidnapping neighbors, holding them captive in my basement. This wasn't my cup of tea. Well, this is it. I'll need you to take over from here. Don't make the same mistake I did, lest you regret it for the rest of your life. This was the last thing she said to me, though I have no idea what any of it meant. Must have been knocked unconscious again, because the next thing I remember, I was waking up in her basement floor, no longer bound by my restraints. For one reason or another, she didn't kill me. I was a free man. Without warning, a group of trained operatives burst through the basement door and raced down to help me up. You all right? Yeah, I'm fine. What's going on? I noticed a few of the men walk on opposite sides of the room and gather evidence. One guy ripped open a cage, grabbed one of the dogs, and unzipped him, revealing that it was nothing but a hollow carcass. Empty, sir. Collection of shells. Yeah, just as I suspected. No matter. Load him into the truck with the hard drives. Hopefully she didn't wipe them before she left. I must have looked completely bewildered, because the gentleman grabbed me by the shoulders and looked me straight in the eye. Everything's fine now. We'll be on that woman's tail for a long time. It may not have captured her, but this will be a big win. It's all thanks to you. I was confused, but more relieved that it was all over. Sure you're all right? Doesn't need a ride to the hospital? I shook my head, not wishing to be poked and prodded after what I had endured. I just didn't trust doctors anyway. I wanted to go home. All right. Let me walk you to your house. I agreed, and we were off. Couldn't wait to get inside. The whole ordeal behind me. That was the plan anyway. Whatever government officials they were, the entire crew picked the place clean and left my neighborhood within a couple of hours. That night, I received a call from them for a statement regarding the situation. I obliged and asked some questions myself. Though the information was privileged, I guilted them by giving up some details, claiming I needed some peace of mind so I could sleep at night. The fact that I was just a frail old man helped. It would seem my neighbor was a high-ranking discipline in an android cult, hell-bent on infiltrating various government agencies. They were currently in the process of recruiting new members to aid in their cause. That's all I was told. which is more than I thought I'd get. This was enough to placate my curiosity, keep me from dwelling on the events as they unfolded. I thanked the man on the other end, and I hung up, content with my findings. After ending the call, I heard a knock at the door. I didn't usually get visitors that late at night, but I suspected it would be one of my neighbors asking about the sting operation that took place next door. I opened up, and to my surprise, there was no person there to greet me. No, not a person. Instead, there was a dog. Identical to my neighbor's. And before I could process its arrival, it trotted inside and sat on the floor. A voice emanated from its collar. "Shut the door." I did as the dog said, baffled and afraid. "Hello. I am serial number 724234. I will be your core companion on your journey of fulfillment. True adventure awaits. Would you like to begin your first task?" I didn't know how to respond. Or what in God's name was happening. It was at that point that I felt an itch running up the length of my torso. It was subtle at first, but it grew to the point that I had to reach down my shirt and scratch at it, and that's when I felt familiar metal across my fingers. It took a moment for it to sink in, but I knew exactly what I was feeling. It was a zipper. Before you listen to this, make sure you're alone. If you're in a room, close the door. If you're by a window, look outside and make sure there is no one there. The only way others should know about this story is by hearing it themselves. Don't repeat this out loud to anyone. They'll hear you. But you are able to read it to yourself or record it yourself. Right now, these are the only two exceptions I know about. Once you think you're alone, look at the screen and do not take your eyes off of it until you're finished reading or listening to a recording. We will know if you look away. It started on Sunday, November 4th, 2012. I'm in my senior year of high school and I had a wonderful girlfriend. We were at my house mourning about school the next day and terribly bored. She came over so I could help her with a project that just had to be due the next day. I had hoped that we'd be able to fool around a little, but she needed this A, as she would fail the marking period. We finished around 8 o'clock. She didn't need to leave until 10. So we still had 2 hours with each other, and the only other person who was home was my little 8-year-old sister whom I had to babysit. My parents were at some dinner meeting until 10, but I knew them too well. They'd be home around midnight. I wanted to play it safe because they didn't allow my girlfriend over past 8. They were afraid that I'd be getting her pregnant or something. We went on the internet because there was nothing else to do. She wasn't in the mood to fool around, couldn't stand another homework assignment. The internet was the only means of escaping these dull hours. So we watched videos on YouTube for a while, looking up the newest popular videos until we ended up watching some creepypastas. We both had been watching creepypastas before we were dating, so we knew what to expect. We had a hard time becoming truly scared of them like we used to. We kept trying to find some that would scare us, but the videos we watched weren't as scary as we'd hoped. So by now it was almost 9:30. We were upset that none of the videos we were watching were creeping us out. We were about to give up on searching. I saw this unusual thumbnail. All it showed was a man standing with his head looking down and hair covering his face. Now, what was strange about the thumbnail was that there was no time limit or author, just a title that read, "The Man Who Looked Down." We both agreed that this would be the final video, and if it did creep us out, we'd give up. I moved my mouse to press on the video link, and the moment I clicked it, the video went into full screen, and the man I saw in the thumbnail standing there. I moved my mouse around, trying to find the loading bar, but it wasn't there. I pressed escape on my keyboard to get out of full screen, but the screen didn't move. For a second, I thought the computer was frozen. But in the video, the man was standing in what seemed to be a front lawn of a house, one I'd never seen before. The tree next to him was moving with the wind. My girlfriend and I had no idea what was going on, but I never took my eyes away from the screen because I felt like there was something I had to see, and if I took my eyes away for a moment, I would miss something. I didn't know how long my girlfriend and I stared at that man, waiting for something. It felt like a couple minutes. But while I was staring at him, I felt like there was something wrong. He was changing me. I actually felt scared. I don't know if my girlfriend felt it, but I didn't have time to think about it. Before I thought something grabbed my shoulder so tight the nails pierced my skin, I turned around to see the face of my father. He opened his mouth to say something, but was interrupted by my girlfriend's ear-shattering scream. I writhed back around, almost screamed myself. The man had looked up, and he must have run closer to the screen because all I could see was his face now, staring at me. The hair was out of the way to show his disgusting, disfigured face. His nose was torn on the left nostril, allowing people to look inside of the hole into his head. His mouth was open, larger than any normal human could bear. Part of his cheek was missing with a hole about the size of a large fist. He had no tongue, no top rows of teeth, only a bottom row of dark, chipped teeth that had been long since taken care of. But the part of his face that will never leave my mind was his eyes. They were half red, half white eyes. The half-white parts had red veins protruding out of them, while the red sides had white veins protruding. There was no sound, just him staring through the screen for a couple of seconds before my computer turned itself off. I looked at the clock, and it was 12:30. It was impossible. I was thinking it felt like 5 minutes. I looked back at my father, who also saw the face and seemed a little shocked himself. Pulled himself together and told my girlfriend to leave. She left without saying goodbye. My father then gave me a talk about disobeying and other shit, but most of the time I wasn't listening. I was too busy thinking about that man. He seemed to have moved the moment I looked away, which I couldn't understand how that could happen. It was also the fact that we started watching at 9:30 and had been interrupted at 12:30. We had been watching the man for 3 hours straight without looking away or blinking. As my dad was finished, I had to sleep. I wanted to talk to my girlfriend about the video, what happened. I woke up the next morning, something was out of the ordinary. It looked like a black smudge on my lawn. I looked again, it was gone. Shook it out of my mind, thinking it was just some stray cat, maybe a raccoon. I walked to the kitchen, I grabbed my lunch, started walking out the door to wait for my bus. At the corner of my eye, I saw something move. I turned quickly and ended up staring out of my kitchen window. I walked slowly towards it to look outside. When I reached the window, I looked around my lawn slowly, taking in as much detail as I could see. There was nothing there. I was starting to get scared until I heard the school bus stop outside. I ran out the door and raced to the bus. Once I reached it, I almost collided with the door. The driver opened it, and I walked into the shuttle. I sat down quickly and stared at my seat window. Everything was normal. I remembered as I was running toward the bus, I had that feeling of being chased. I felt like I was literally running for my life. I wanted to stop thinking about what was happening, so as the bus started moving, I looked away from my window and I decided I'll just listen to some music. But just as my head shifted out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. Something moved again. I looked back at my house just in time to see that man. A man standing on my lawn before the bus moved him out of my vision. His hair covering his face. As he looked down, I didn't know what to do. Should I call the police? The man didn't do anything, not yet. He was just scaring me, but now, how did he find me? Did I know him? I needed to talk to someone about this, my girlfriend. I arrived at school and I waited till second period to talk to her. It was our only study hall together. And when second period arrived, she didn't show up. I asked her friends where she was. They said that she never showed up. I assumed she must have been sick. I just visited her after school. Her house wasn't that far away. This wasn't like her. Her project, the one we worked on last night, was due today. And if she was sick, she would have texted me, or maybe her friends. The moment the last school bell rang, I sprinted to her house. I knocked on the door. There was no response. I slammed on the door loud enough for the neighbors to hear me. Still no response. Even if she wasn't home, at least her mom would have been there after school. I tried to turn the knob, and surprisingly, it was unlocked. I opened the door slowly and I yelled in to see if anyone was home. No response. I yelled that I was coming in. I guess I didn't expect a response. I also didn't receive one. I walked into the darkness. All the lights were off. I felt the walls for the nearest light switch and I turned it on. The room was illuminated for a couple of seconds before the light bulbs burst. I'm still not sure about what I saw in those short seconds, but I thought there was a quick glimpse of a woman in the doorway to the kitchen. I found some curtains covering a window and I opened them. The room was now filled with sunlight. I looked towards the kitchen door and it was empty. I didn't go in. I didn't feel like I needed to yet. I went upstairs to my girlfriend's room instead. I opened the door to her room and I stopped. I was hit by some unexplainable, horrible stench. My eyes burned. Once my eyes were able to dilate, I saw her. In him. My girlfriend was on the floor, kneeling, looking directly at the man. Almost every inch of her body was sliced open, bloody. I just stood there, horrified at what I was witnessing. It seemed like an eternity of staring at that man and my girlfriend before she finally spoke. All she was able to say to me was, "I'm sorry." Then she turned around and looked at me, and her eyes, dear God, her eyes, they were sliced down the middle of each, making one half red and the other white. I only had time to hold out my hand to try to grab her before the man fell on her and started ripping off her skin and devouring her like a wild animal. Her heart-wrenching scream must have filled the entire neighborhood. I turned to run, but the moment I looked away, I got pounced on. That monster slammed me into the ground and started to rip off my skin as well. Each time, its fingers ripped into my flesh and shoved it into its horribly disfigured mouth. My screams were almost as loud as my girlfriend's. I didn't know how, but I was able to move myself and the monster towards the stairs. We toppled down them and I felt my arm break. The sounds of cracking bone filled the house. The monster fell off of me and I was able to get up and run towards the front door. The pain on my back and my arms was unbearable. I sprinted out the door and tripped onto the steps. I fell face first and collided into the concrete. My nose was broken. Skin on my face was almost completely torn off. I could see through one eye as the other was covered in blood. It was standing in the doorway. It was looking at me. I was unable to move. I was in so much pain. I wanted to die. I was sure that monster was going to kill me, but of course that didn't happen because I wouldn't be writing this, right? It just looked at me for a couple more seconds before finally saying 3 unforgettable words. "Don't look down." And then I blacked out. I woke up in a hospital 3 days later. So my nurse told me. I was still in horrible pain. Medicine helped to ease it a little. I've never saw my back since then. I'm sure the monster tore the skin off. There was nothing but bone. Police came to me to ask me questions about what happened. Tried to tell them everything, but as I continued to tell the story, it seemed more and more unbelievable. They thought I was crazy. They stopped the search for my girlfriend's killer days later because of unreliable evidence. The day they stopped the search was also the day I had gotten the news. My father had gone off-road and crashed into some forest. When the police found his car, he wasn't inside of it. His body hasn't been found to this day. I'm sure that man had gotten him. There was no one with my father, so the man probably devoured everything. I left the hospital months later with an almost unrecognizable face, a crooked back, broken mind. I went home only to find my mom. She'd hung herself. I didn't bother to call the police. I went straight to my computer to find that video. After backtracking through my history, I found it. The man who looked down. But it wasn't there. Removed. The video that had changed my life was gone. I gave up shortly after looking through the videos. I closed the web browser, started writing this, and halfway through writing this, I got an email. A video link. I knew it was the man, but I forced myself to click it. There he was. He was standing in front of another house, but this house was familiar. It was familiar because it was my house. I can hear his soft wheezing. I could smell his horrible death-soaked breath. I can feel his eyes staring at me. He isn't looking down. He's looking at me. He's looking for victims on the internet, and I'm writing this, telling this as a warning to everyone. Don't look for me. For once I get this story somewhere on the internet, I'll turn around and I'll look down. My only regret is leaving my little sister all alone. Please forgive me, Julie. I've been depressed for a long time. Mostly since my dad died. All his friends called him a hero. He was a cop. And he sacrificed himself to save the lives of 23 people being held by an active shooter. I was 9 when that happened. I remember it like it was yesterday. Yesterday was my 17th birthday. And now my life is a nightmare. My mom eventually remarried, but I can't blame her for that. She was lonely and needed help raising a troubled kid. I just wish that she was more aware of whom she was bringing into our lives. He's not why I'm in trouble. He's an asshole who treats my mom like shit. She's too in love with him to see it. Now, he's not the reason I ended up here, but he's a precipitating factor. It started when I heard that my friend Cassie had run away. I didn't get it. Cassie lived in a suburban wonderland. Her parents were still married. They doted on her. Her siblings weren't douchebags. She got really good grades. I mean, they weren't straight A's, but good enough that she was on the honor roll, and her folks were proud of her. Idyllic is the word I'd use. I spoke to her parents a time or two. They wanted to know the first time if Cassie had said anything to me. She hadn't. And I said as much. The second time, I went over to be, supportive in their tough time. I knocked on their door and Mrs. Beeman answered. Oh, hi. Everything okay? I said it was. Hey, Mrs. Beeman, I just thought that I'd come over and say hey. See if you guys had heard anything regarding Cassie. I'm sorry if it seems insensitive. Cassie's mom opened the door wide and smiled a little. Oh no, honey. Please come in. I know you probably miss her as much as we do. I did. Cassie had been one of my best friends maybe 5 years ago. We'd grown apart a little after my dad died. And I guess that was my fault. I withdrew from everyone. I said as much to Miss Beeman, and her eyes welled up with tears. We don't know where Cassie is. We got a letter shortly after she went missing. It shocked me a little. Missing? I thought she'd just run away. I don't understand. Miss Beeman opened a binder that sat on her coffee table and pushed it towards me, where I sat next to her on the couch. I read it aloud. Mom? Dad? I'm with Greg. I'm not in danger. I just needed to get out of the dead-end town and see the rest of the world. I'm sorry if this disappoints you, but I need this. Love. Cassie. Cassie's mom closed the binder, snuffed back tears, and said, "We got this maybe a week after she disappeared. That's what convinced the police that she was a runaway." I looked at her face, and I could tell that she was less than convinced of her own words. I couldn't help myself. Who the fuck is Greg? Mrs. Beeman flinched at my language, and I apologized. Sorry, I just don't understand any of this. I never knew any Greg. I mean, I know Cassie and I aren't the best of friends anymore, but I never heard of her seeing anyone. A small smile touched her lips. It's all right, dear. Richard, Mr. Beeman said the same thing when he read the letter. I had never heard Mr. Beeman swear in the 10 years that Cassie and I had been best friends. Was Cassie depressed at all? Mrs. Beeman frowned a bit and started to shake her head, and then stopped. I won't lie to you. I feel like I don't know who my own daughter was. If she was depressed, I didn't know it. I spoke with her a little while longer and thanked her for her time and for the memories. I should have gone home, but I didn't want to deal with Todd myself. I called my mom at work, told her that I was going to go to the library and do my homework before I went home. She said that she'd see me when she got off work. I hate lying to my mom, but I wasn't going to tell her that I was going to find a nice, quiet spot in the woods and smoke some weed. And I did just that. After the emotional drain of the Beeman house, I just needed to not give a shit for a little while. Found myself a spot in the woods, pulled my stash out from under the stump. I hid it there ever since Todd busted me smoking in my old playhouse in the backyard. Wasn't too far from home. I wasn't exactly lying, because if my mom or Todd ever pinged my location on my cell, it put me exactly within 100 meters of the library. Took a few hits. I leaned back against the stump. I closed my eyes. Just listened to the trees. It was dead quiet. But it shouldn't have been. No birds, no critters, even insect noises. Nothing. Felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up from the wrongness of it. I was about to open my eyes when I heard a snapping noise, like someone or something had stepped on a branch. I should have gotten the hell out of there, but it was like my brain reverted to childhood, you know? I can't see it can't see me. I heard more muffled noises until it stopped, just behind me to the left. The shifting of fabric as if someone were sitting or squatting near me. A deep, almost melodic voice came to me. I'd say that I heard it, but that's not quite right. I mean, I did hear it, but it was inside my head. Keeping your eyes closed is probably a good idea, kid. Felt a hand take the pipe from me. I heard a lighter spark and the sound of someone inhaling as the voice spoke again. Not bad. Before you dismiss this, no, I'm not a hallucination. I opened my mouth to speak and the voice shushed me. My mouth clamped shut, but not of my own accord. This is a warning to you. Please stop asking questions about Cassie. Let the Beemans be. They're in enough pain as it is, don't you think? I nodded, trying to think for myself. Felt a sharp poke somewhere behind my eye, and the voice said, yeah. I'm who the letter referred to as Greg. Cassie's with me. And it's going to stay that way for as long as I like. I felt tears squeeze themselves out from underneath my eyelids. I felt the pipe placed back into my hand, and the barest of a breeze blow from the direction of the tremor. No, not a breeze, it was breath. It was fetid, rotten, the touch of musk from the weed. I would hate to have to talk with you again. Not exactly my type.
but I'll make an exception if I need to.
Unbidden images flashed through my mind. Tall, pretty willow girls like Cassie, their faces bordered with black and white. Those of missing posters. So many of them. I shuddered. I shook my head emphatically. He spoke again.
Good. I see we understand each other perfectly. I hope there's not a next time.
I stayed there, shaking, eyes squeezed shut for how long, I don't know. And I started to hear the sounds of nature again. Birdsong, the buzzing of insects. I screamed when my phone rang, my eyes flew open, and at first I was surprised to see it was dark. I saw my mom's number on the screen and answered. I have been texting you for an hour. I'm in the library parking lot. Get your ass out here and let's go home. Dinner is getting cold. Taking a shuddering breath, and I told her I'd be out in a minute. I stashed my pipe and made my way to her car. She chewed my ass the whole way home about not answering her, and all I could do was apologize. I'm writing this down so I remember it. And I hope he can't dig into my head and see that I am. Because if he does, I might be the next runaway. Ever since I was a boy, I have always loved the woods. Actually, had might be a better word, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So as a child, I lived in a house right next to a heavily wooded area. Every day I would go out into the woods with my friends, covered nearly every inch of the woods, hiking, camping, climbing trees, you name it. Woods were our playground. We controlled them. That's what I thought. Thinking back, I remember as we ran around the forest out of the corner of my eye, and I could see something quickly flitting between trees next to us, next to me. Put it off as my eyes playing tricks on me. Other times when I was camping with my friends and we were sitting around the fire just out of the firelight, I could have sworn I saw a silhouette of something. And I turned away to get my friend's attention. Look at the thing, it was gone. Not a sound having been made. My friends laughed at me, joked that I was scared of the dark. I laughed with them, assuring them that it was simply a trick of the light or something. Sometimes at night, though, I'd look out the window at the forest. These were the scariest times because I couldn't rationally explain what it was. But when I looked out the window at the woods, I had to see a face. A face amongst the trees. Before it quickly disappeared. Those nights I couldn't sleep or wink. I still went into the woods fairly often, usually at the behest of my friends. I did my best to forget the strange face, which I managed to do for a while. I was 17, and my friends, Hayden, Noah, Mason, my brother Kieran, managed to annoy me into going camping in the woods with them. We packed up our gear, we headed to our usual spot in the woods. We set up a few hours later, it was dark. Had a fire roaring away. Noah sighed, contently, as he leaned back into his camping chair. Well, I'd say I did a good job if I do say so myself, he said. I rolled my eyes. Noah was 16 and a resident goofball. Jokes endlessly streamed from his mouth. Please, I replied. You sat on your ass the whole time. Hey, I set up my chair, Noah retorted. I rolled my eyes again. Hayden, our group's token arrogant son of a bitch, and 16 as well, snorted in laughter. You didn't even do that, Hayden said. Kieran set it up while you were off looking for squirrels in the trees. I heard from a reliable source that an albino squirrel lives out here, Noah stated matter-of-factly. Curtis is not a reliable source, Mason cut in, using air quotes as he said reliable source. Mason was a funny athletic kid and one of the youngest in the group at age 15. The guy's so high most of the time he might as well have seen a unicorn and believed it, he continued. Noah hesitated. He actually told me that he saw one over by the river. We all burst out laughing. Kieran, the youngest at 14, gave Noah a sarcastic thumbs up as Noah glared at us. You're such a dumbass, my brother told him. Noah grumbled under his breath as he crossed his arms. Let's just roast some marshmallows, okay? Noah said in a huff, attempting to change the subject. All right, I replied, still grinning. I reached back behind my chair and groped around for the bag of marshmallows. The others were reaching for their roasting sticks as my fingers brushed not against the plastic bag, but against something smooth and warm, almost like skin. I yanked my hand away in fear and shock. I heard whatever I had just touched skittering off into the trees. I looked into the dark forest around us, but I couldn't see anything. My friend stared at me in confusion. Dude, Mason said after a few tense moments of silence. You all right? Yeah, I'm fine, I said. My hand I brushed an animal or something. That's all. Oh, don't be such a baby, Cameron, Eden said with a mocking grin. I glared at him as he continued. Pass me the marshmallows. Fuck you, I said, reaching back and tossing him the bag of marshmallows. Nothing was there this time. The moon quickly eased back in our general laughter and good cheer, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that the forest was giving me. The feeling that we weren't alone. I woke up the next morning to panicked shouts and arguing. Rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I left my tent to see Mason, Kieran, and Noah yelling at each other. What the hell's going on? I asked, annoyed. Noah looked at me, a confused and frightened expression on his face. Hayden's gone, he told me, a fearful edge in his voice. What? I asked in bewilderment. Hayden's gone, Noah replied. Vanished, poof, disappeared. No, he could have gone home, I said, trying to bring up some rationality in the situation. With all his stuff still here? Mason said, pointing at Hayden's chair and daybag. I blinked in confusion as I stared at the camping gear. You were tending with him, I said, returning my attention to Noah. He went to bed when we all did. Where'd he go? Last night, I heard him leave our tent to take a piss, Noah explained. I went back to sleep right after he left, and he's still not back. Fear was beginning to grip me as I tried to think of what could have happened. Maybe he got lost. In these woods? You can't get lost here. Look, Kieran cut in. Mason and I will go look for him. You guys pack up while we're gone, all right? All right, I said with a hesitant nod before adding, be careful. Mason and Kieran nodded in reply before marching off into the trees and out of sight. Noah and I began packing our camping gear. About an hour went by before we finished storing our gear and cleaning up the campsite. I sat down on a stump, balancing my leg nervously as we waited for Mason and Kieran. A few more minutes had passed when I heard them come back, or more accurately, run back. Their faces were pale and pure terror was written on them as they quickly grabbed their backpacks. We're leaving, Mason shouted through panicked breaths. Wait, what about Hayden? Noah replied. He's dead, Kieran answered. We need to leave now. Noah was about to protest, but listened and grabbed his and Hayden's backpacks. I quickly shouldered my bag and we began to run out of the forest. Panic was rising in our chests as we sprinted through the forest. I couldn't believe it. Hayden was dead. There wasn't anything deadly in these woods. The river wasn't fast or deep. None of our climbing trees were too tall. Falling from them barely merited the sprained ankle. There wasn't any bears or wolves in these woods either. We reached the tree line and burst into an open patch of grass between two houses. We slowed to a stop, gasping for air. Now, Noah wheezed. Talk. What happened? All right, give me a damn minute, Mason huffed. We all went silent, resting and catching our breaths. The horror of the entire situation sank in during those quiet, tense moments as Kieran and Mason caught their breaths. We found Hayden near the river, Mason explained upon recovering. He shuddered as he remembered what he saw. He was impaled on a tree branch. His hands were tied to two other branches above his head and his fucking intestine. His eyes had been clawed out and his face... Jesus, his face is frozen. This awful look of horror. His shirt had been ripped open. Oh, God. Mason stopped talking and began to retch. Kieran picked up where he left off. Absolute terror in his face. Scratches in his chest were the words "wrong one." Both of us threw up on the spot before running back to the campsite. Noah was pale. His face had an even more fearful expression than Mason and Kieran. We sat in silence before Noah spoke again. Fuck. What do we do? We need to call the police, I said, trying my best to hold back my panic. What about the woods? Kieran asked. Man, fuck the woods, Mason shouted. I'm never going back in there. We all nodded in agreement. We need to get out of here, I said, standing up straight. You don't need to tell me twice. Noah agreed. We hurriedly walked away from the trees that we never returned to, fearful of what lay within. A few days had gone by since Hayden's death. The police recovered his body during that time, and his funeral will be in the next few weeks. Closed casket, of course. Mason, Kieran, Noah, and I all refused to speak to the police on the matter. I mean, what could we say? We had no idea what happened. We were originally suspects for his murder until his autopsy. There was no evidence that anyone had killed him. No DNA was present on Hayden's corpse other than his own. But I know what killed him. It had been whatever creature had been stalking us. The face in the forest. And I know what wrong one means now. Every day the creature grows closer. I can tell what it looks like now. Hairless, gray, mottled skin, long, gangly limbs that end in hands and feet with razor-sharp nails, and a long, thin head with sunken black eyes that never blink. I lock my windows and doors every night, and sometimes I can hear it scratching at the glass of my window pane. It wants in. It wants me, and when it grows impatient enough, nothing will stop it. Nothing will stop the face amongst the trees from taking me. A few years back, I worked as a nurse in the geriatric unit of a hospital in my hometown. There was one woman there with pale blue eyes, whose mind was still fantastically sharp, and her desire to socialize and make new friends set her apart from most other living things in that wing of the facility. That woman and I soon became close for this reason. Her name was Yana. I still miss her every day since she passed. The strange thing about Yana was not her accent, which I could only place vaguely as Eastern European, nor her disinclination to talk about her past, which meant I never learned exactly where she grew up. Now, what fascinated me the most was that a strange young man, badly mutilated, plainly blind and mute, would visit her every single day. His hands appeared deformed, seemingly eroded at each digit down to the first knuckle. But each evening, a little after dinner time, he would visit. They would sit together, she would read to him, or sometimes sing in her frail old voice. Sometimes they would just hold hands in silence. Finally, I gathered up the courage to ask her about this man. And in a strange moment of openness, she agreed to tell me the story. My sister and I were the only surviving members of our family after our father passed away in 1964. These were very hard times for my old country, and Father had grown so sick that we eventually were forced to allow him to starve, rather than waste food to comfort him as he inevitably died. Sister had been losing her mind little by little before all this happened, but I could see in her eyes, as we buried Father, she had finally gone somewhere far away inside herself. I remember the crows, perched in thick groups like clots of preening black movement, watching us in the cemetery from all over the roofs. We moved to bury father quickly because the crows were all hungry as we were. Sister took to begging in the streets, sometimes trading sex for rides into the city nearby in hopes that her begging would be more profitable there. It was during these terrible times that she conceived a son, Bastard, whose father wouldn't be known to her but would certainly to some manner of predatory monster. This was the only kind of man my sister knew in those days of her life. The child was delivered healthily, happily, with a glowing spirit that broke my heart, because I knew that soon the young boy's eyes would look like mine, like my sister's. Even on the day he was born, I knew his beautiful, joyous innocence could not last. Sister didn't care for her son as she should have, as God and goodness alike demanded that a mother should care for her child. She wouldn't change the boy's soiled diapers, leaving this to me instead, nor would forget to feed him even when his hungry wailing was ringing shrill and miserable through the whole house. Eventually, she began to take him out begging, using the child as a prop with which to elicit sympathy from strangers. She was most pleased when he looked his worst. He even complained to me once or twice that she could raise no money at all on days that he looked too healthy. I can never forget her final act of cruelty against Vasily. I named him myself after Sister couldn't be bothered. It was morning. I'd walked outside in our yard to smell the air. The child was lying motionless on the ground there, seeming to be quite dead, smeared as he was with his own blood. His little fingers and toes were black with frostbite. Sister hadn't even buried him in anything when she laid him down hours ago in the dark of night. Crows, which were all hungry as we were, had plucked his beautiful eyes and tongue from his still living body. I grabbed him up with tears already pouring from my cheeks, thinking I claimed a corpse. And it was only when he stirred against my breast that I realized he might be saved. I swaddled him as warmly as I could. I fed him something before rushing him down to the home of the town's only doctor. Nearly beat down the front door with my fist as he answered, with sleep still in his eyes because it was so early. I paid him with all the heirloom jewelry from Mother that I had, all that I'd been able to hide from Sister over the years. An hour or so later, the doctor told me that Vasily would live, but asked that he be allowed to monitor the child for the rest of the day, and I told him I'd be fine. As today would be a busy day for me, and indeed it was. By evening, I had smashed Sister's head to a flattened pulp with a cast-iron skillet from our stove. Obtained a train ticket from Passage out of our home country, and I made plans to give Vasily the best life that he could still have yet. Vasily, my son now, knows nothing about any of this, of course. I told him only that he was adopted away from a situation which he was likely not to survive. The full optimism I saw on his face when he was born survives to this day inside his heart. Sister, in all of her malice, had only managed to suppress it for a while, and now, almost 50 years later, he still visits his elderly mother every single day. She beamed with pride as she finished her story. I would say no more. And she was right. Vasily loved her so much, wore no resentment on his face for his injuries. He always seemed to be smiling pleasantly, even though in his blindness he often didn't know anyone was looking. He visited her every day until she died, and he was holding her hand when she passed. I knew from his interactions with hospital staff that he understood spoken English, and so, at Yana's funeral, I told him that I had been a friend of his mother's. I told him that she was the most amazing, wonderful woman I had ever met. His sad, grateful smile grew deeper, and he nodded his head. His response came in sign language.
She was.
So I discovered the meaning of life. At least, that's what my eager customers are led to believe. See, 2 or 3 times a month I post a listing titled The Meaning of Life to various auction sites. I couple it with a sappy picture of a sunset or a rainbow and a description that reads, "All views are subjective. Results may vary." Most people wouldn't bat an eye at such a ridiculous listing, but there are some gullible folks out there that take the bait. When the bidding ends, I usually take home anywhere between $5 to $12. After I've received my money via PayPal, I ship out the item. What is the item, you might ask? Well, I scribble down an inspirational quote or a life lesson onto a piece of paper, and I mail it out in your standard letter-size envelope. Quotes are usually from various writers, historical figures, or the Bible. Some of them include, "If light is in your heart, you will find your way home. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. It's never too late to be what you might have been." And that's it. One stamp, drop in the mailbox, my work is done. It's as simple as that. You might call me a scammer, a con artist, or perhaps even a plagiarist. And in truth, you're correct. I'm probably taking advantage of the naive people out there who are probably just looking for a sense of purpose in life. Also, I can make a quick buck. I'd like to think most people know it's bullshit and purchase my listing just to see what I'll send them. Besides, I'm a bachelor right out of college. So long as I can make a few dents in my phone bill and eat a packet of ramen each night, I'll sleep just fine. Now, as you might imagine, I receive quite a bit of hate mail. Learn to ignore angry emails, private messages on the auction sites, and as soon as I see that it's from one of my customers, it gets deleted. I do, however, receive the occasional snail mail. It's unavoidable, as my P.O. box is listed on all the envelopes I send out. It would be pretty easy for me to toss these letters in the trash with the rest of my junk, but I never can. Something about receiving a physical letter from someone, good or bad, compels me to read it. I feel that anyone who takes the time to write one deserves to have their voice heard, even if I don't really care what they have to say. The more physical letters I've received, the more amused I am by them. To paint a better picture, here are a few of my favorite quotes from my fan mail that I've received over the years. "You're nothing but a glorified fortune cookie. You'll rot in hell for the sins you've committed, mark my words. And you're a real fucking piece of shit." You know that? I reached a point where reading these letters has become the highlight of my week. I've even tacked up some of the better ones on a corkboard in my bedroom. You might think it's sick, a little messed up, but I think it's hilarious. Not all the letters I receive are bad. There's one guy by the name of Red, no last name, that's all he ever writes above his return address, who mails me constantly. He sends me inspirational quotes in exchange for mine. I assume he's a repeat buyer who enjoys paying for and receiving cheerful messages in his mailbox every now and again. A man of class and dignity. My kind of customer. The first quote that Red ever sent me was, "The fear of death follows me from the fear of life. A man who lives fully is prepared to die at any time." It's Mark Twain. This was a great first impression, as Mark Twain is one of my favorite authors, and the return quote was much appreciated. As such, I hung it up next to the hate mail on my corkboard. Some of the things Red sends me, however, they're not corkboard material. Some of the quotes he sends are morbid and depressing, and other times, he'll mail me small packages containing little trinkets that I have no use for. It's a little weird, but I figure the guy is depressed, just needs a friend. Maybe the quotes he buys from me are the only things that he has to look forward to each morning. Perhaps the things he sends me are his way of saying thanks. To me, it's validation that what I'm doing isn't completely sleazy. But here's where things get weird. Today I received another envelope from Red. I smiled when I pulled it out of my P.O. box. His letters and gifts, no matter how odd, were just as much, if not more, of a highlight to my week than that endless entertaining hate mail. Upon opening the envelope, however, my smile vanished. Inside was a photograph of me, taken up close to my bedroom window. On the back of the photograph was another one of Red's quotes. "You look so alone. What's the meaning in your life?" I remember Fantasia Forest. I'm one of the few people who's willing to admit that, and I'm probably the only person who remembers it for all the good instead of all the bad. I'll never forget the summer it opened. The summer of 1954. I knew I was in for something special when I saw those massive, brilliantly colored mushrooms decorating the parking lot. As I marched past the cement toadstools, I came upon a castle. An honest-to-God pink castle. My 8-year-old brain practically exploded. First thing that greeted you on the other side of that castle was a sculpture of Humpty Dumpty. He sat perched on the stone wall, pointing you towards the winding path that stretched from one magical scene to the next. As you walked along, you saw a statue of the Pied Piper leading away a group of hypnotized children. Then there was a big fiberglass shoe with crooked windows and a plastic slide. Beyond that, you found yourself in front of a 2-story house. Only this was the house from Hansel and Gretel. The walkway was lined with monstrous large candy canes, gumdrops scattered across the gingerbread walls. Chocolate balconies overlooked the garden, and a chimney in the shape of an ice cream cone poked out of that sugar-frosted roof. You could get lost exploring the gnome village. All those rustic huts and leering faces, and eventually you'd arrive at Old MacDonald's farm, which is a petting zoo. Rabbits, goats, pigs, ducks, sheep, you name it. If you wanted, you'd even hitch a ride in Cinderella's pumpkin coach. Of course, employees were dressed up everywhere you looked. Alice, Sleeping Beauty, Red Riding Hood, Tom Thumb, even Mother Goose herself. It was a living tribute to the imagination. You have to understand something. Before Fantasia Forest came along, theme parks didn't exist. Back then, you were lucky to find a few kiddie parks here and there, but frankly, there wasn't much. Most merry-go-rounds, a couple of dusty ponies, a bunch of picnic tables covered in bird crap, and that was it. Phil Ballard dreamed of something bigger. Phil was a local businessman, owned a few different stores around town. Everyone seemed to know Phil. Everyone loved him. Every town probably has a Phil Ballard. Upstanding citizen, always quick with a smile and a handshake. Kathleen, his wife, was like that too. She came from a prominent family and spent a lot of her time volunteering, working with charities, hosting fundraisers. I remember my parents going to a few of those. All in all, Phil and Kathleen were the perfect couple. They had money, friends. The only thing they were missing was a bundle of joy to call their own. It took him a while. Phil managed to secure 20 acres of land just off the highway. In a year, he had a park dedicated to all the classic fairy tales and nursery rhymes. The place was an instant hit. I remember crowds of tourists. I'd never seen so many out-of-town license plates before. We must have had thousands of visitors that summer. It was a huge boost to the local economy. The hotels and restaurants all cleaned up. Newspapers were mentioning us all over the country. If Phil was a hero before Fantasia Forest, then he was a downright saint afterward. There was a rumor that a fellow by the name of Walt Disney had dropped by one afternoon, looking to find some inspiration for his own little park. I don't know if that story is really true or not, but it should be. Phil even had some of the employees dressed as his own original characters. A wacky lamb with the legs of a spider, a man with 3 twisted heads stacked on top of each other, and a cheerful little imp who wore a blood-red robe, always carried his trusty cat-o'-nine tails. I don't think any of them ever spoke, but that's what gave them their charm. Allard's Bozos. I was having so much fun that summer, I did my best to ignore the silly things some of the other kids were saying, like how the costumes for Phil's characters didn't have any zippers. Apparently the rumor started when the kids overheard a few staff members talking about how no one knew who was really underneath those oversized masks. I can't blame the kids, but the staff should have known better. So Phil hired some outside help but didn't tell anyone. It helped maintain the fantasy. It was a brilliant idea. Much harder to ignore, though, was the news. Kathleen's death. She had drowned in a bathtub after overdosing on some medications. That hit everyone like a sledgehammer. Phil, God bless him, shouldered his grief with grace and dignity. He was still the same old Phil, always smiling, always quick with a handshake. After a few weeks, things seemed to feel normal again, but then came that weekend in August. I went to bed after a glorious Saturday at Fantasia Forest, expecting to do the whole thing all over again when I woke up. How wrong I was. At first, the news said that 8 children had gone missing. My friends told me the number was really 9. I guess numbers besides the point. Kids were missing, plain and simple. I didn't know any of them, but they were children just like me. Innocent little children, gone in the blink of an eye. Everyone had a theory. Kidnappings, runaways, mass suicides, ritual sacrifice, frickin' alien abductions. The only thing the poor youngsters had in common was their last known location. Fantasia Forest. Well, of course, all the kids were there. That hardly proves a thing, but for most people, it was enough to get them talking. They said that Kathleen's family never believed her death was accidental, that she was even pregnant at the time. Others said that she'd been worried about Phil's behavior for months. He was obsessed with his theme park, one story went. He was talking to himself behind closed doors when another. The craziest one by far was that he believed his bozo characters weren't characters at all, but that they had actually climbed through his window one night and told him to build Fantasia Forest. What a load of nonsense. I suppose the bozos even convinced him to kill his wife and unborn baby. Police never found a shred of evidence that Phil hurt Kathleen, or anyone else for that matter. But did the busybodies care about evidence? Not for a minute. They were all convinced that Phil had something to do with those missing kids. He buried their corpses under the gnome village. He turned them into statues, blah, blah, blah. In less than a month, Phil had gone from the town's favorite son to the town's favorite boogeyman. It was all too much for him. The workers found Phil one morning in the gingerbread house. He slipped in some paint during the night and hung himself. There was no suicide note. The townsfolk got their wish. The good man is dead. Fantasia Forest was shut down for the winter. Reopened the next spring under new management. Unfortunately, the damage had already been done. People stayed away, attendance shriveled up. And to make things worse, Disneyland opened the same year. Fantasia just didn't keep up. The park was shuttered later that fall. This time for good. I'd always kept waiting for it to be turned into a strip mall or condominium. But for some reason that never happened. Fantasia Forest just sat there year after year, those beautiful statues and buildings left to rot. You'd still see the pink castle spires from the highway, peeking out from behind the treetops. Giant holes pockmarked the fake brickwork, giving you a nice view of the skeletal rebarb frame. I'm sometimes tempted to drive down and take a closer look. That load of good, that'll do. I had to put up a barbed wire fence to keep out all the vandals. I suppose I should be thankful. Seeing the place abandoned and decaying just remind me of how much the time had gone by. How that little 8-year-old kid is now an old man with a bad back, arthritic knee. Finally, some good news. I had just heard a local businessman was planning to renovate the park. He's gonna make it bigger and better than ever before, and I'll be the first one through the castle gates, right along with my grandkids. They're gonna have the time of their lives exploring the gnome village, climbing in and out of the gingerbread house, playing with the funny bozos. We'll be there because Fantasia Forest is still a wonderful dream. And like Phil always says, you can't kill a dream. Ever just stand back and admire the presence of even the simple atmosphere around you? The aroma, the embellishment, or the my hands in motion on an old antique clock, making the room seem alive. This was my reaction as I stepped foot into my newly purchased house with my beautiful fiancée. We both grounded our feet into the hardwood floor below us, a feeling quite rewarding. As we were both used to worn-out carpets and concrete basements throughout our lives, the ceiling was at a pretty high altitude, an easement of my claustrophobia. There was a fireplace stuck into the wall to the left of the room, mirroring the warmness of its instance. Spiraling stairs led up to the second floor, delivering a dramatic addition to the scene before us. There was, however, an even more elegant and interesting part unparalleled to the rest of the house. It was the wallpaper. Colored in black, gray, and white, the paper on the walls was obstructed by designs. In some areas, simplistic black lines danced just inches from the bottom of the wall. Around corners, the designs would change to outlines of various things like staircases and lamps. Unlike most wallpaper you'd see in a home, this house has a different look with every couple of steps taken, almost like its sole purpose was to be offbeat to the rhythm of the rest of the building. I'm sure some folks wouldn't be very fond of the look, but I found beauty within the artistic disruption. My partner mirrored my love for the place, bewildered as she turned around each and every corner. This, after all, was a much-needed change. She was still a little shaky from her divorce a couple of years back. Her past marriage had a wall, just as her abusive ex-husband often did. He was always unsupportive when it came to her art, not to mention violent whenever he drank. It was a refreshing sight to see her eyes widen above a gracious smile. With our new chapter coming to a start, we decided to get an early rest around 7 o'clock, right before nightfall. I was struck completely awake by a loud bang in the middle of the night. Like caffeine manifested into a drum beat. My fiancé was still asleep, as being a deep sleeper rendered the noise ineffective. The bang was accompanied by soft, inaudible voices. These ambiguous communications eventually came to a halt, and were followed by the sounds of scratches, reminiscent of a cat clawing at the walls. I contemplated my choices, but ultimately decided to cautiously search my new place of residence, just in case someone had broken in. Being a new neighbor might have meant that we were fresh target practice for burglars in the area. Exploring, to my dismay, it left me with more questions rather than answers. Exiting the doorway to my bedroom, I kept as silent as humanly possible, so as to not alarm the potential intruders. I wasn't armed, but vulnerability didn't shake me as much as my curiosity or the vibration of the initial thump. Suddenly I spotted something that sent chills through my body. What caught my eye as I turned my head made me blink more than once. You might think me insane, but I swear I saw something behind the wallpaper. Something behind the wallpaper move. A mini silhouette that seemed in sync with the black lines embedded in the paper covering the wall. The figure ran across, escaping around the corner. It'd be the first time I ever say this, but I followed the miniature person on the wall. Approaching the next hallway, things got even more peculiar. I swore I saw the human in the wall pop out into the hallway and dash away. Immediately after this confusing occurrence, the wallpaper turned yellow in color and became plain. Any designs disappeared as if someone freshly painted over both sides. Overtiredness was what my mind deemed an answer to all this chaos, trying to conjure up some comfort and at least delay the perplexity. I made my way back up to bed. I fell asleep, convinced that I sleptwalked. I must have dreamt up my adventure. The morning after, waking up was not so easy. I only got a few hours of sleep before my lovely lady woke me up with a smile brighter than the sun, shaking me like an earthquake and holding out an odd-looking marker in her hand. She stared at me with a grin, saying, "You're the sweetest man I've ever made contact with. The love of my life. You made my heart melt with the words you spoke to me in the middle of the night last night." And gave me an everlasting kiss. Now this had me quite baffled. "What do you mean?" I asked. "How silly of you," she exclaimed. "You know you handed me this marker and told me you wanted to be with me forever, welcoming into your home. You then proceeded to reassure me that nothing, not even the walls, could come between us. So wonderful and cute to hear." Obviously, all this puzzled me beyond belief. I knew for a fact I wasn't even in the bedroom most of the night. Never mind even speaking a word to her. She was passed out. Instead of trying to explain what was on my mind, I looked her in her brown, sparkling eyes and responded, "Oh, yeah, of course, my apologies. I'm still half asleep. I love you so much." Hopping out of bed, still a little shaken, took a few steps towards the door. "Now I'm gonna make us some delectable breakfasts. Some of your favorite, bacon and eggs." I proceeded to leave the room. "Okay. I'm gonna sit here and draw you, and with this, a symbol of our new life together." She smiled, gesturing towards the marker in her hand. "Just let me know when the food is ready." Before heading down to the kitchen, I wandered off to check out the guest room. It was the same floor as the bedroom, still unexplored, fully compared to the other sections of the building. The tinted glass door was a queer choice of entrance to an interior space, nevertheless a division made for temporary residence. In opening it, my mind flipped a switch to discomfort. The walls were a deep shade of red, the floor was made of, well, what seemed to be paper, and the bed was the exact same arrangement as my own. But this wasn't what made me uneasy. Roughly sketched humanoid faces side by side across the walls stared me down. Despite the eyes of ink surrounding my claustrophobic self, I felt alone at that very moment. I had a sudden sense of disconnection from reality and became severely cold. Moments later, I escaped this state of invasive unease, but only by something far worse. A screech. Panicked, I ran, stopping at my bedroom door, flustered. My eyes glistened from the beginning of tears. The bewildered sight of our door stood wide open in front of me, and straight ahead on the red paper wall, a picture of my fiancé's face had been drawn across it in black ink. With her nowhere in physical sight, I searched all around the house, but she had vanished. All that was left was a letter on the floor with a repeating phrase. Not even the walls could come between us. Ever just stand back and admire the presence of even the simple atmosphere around you? The aroma, the embellishment, or the hands in motion on an old antique clock, making the room seem alive. This was my reaction as I stepped foot into my newly purchased house with my beautiful fiancée. We both grounded our feet into the hardwood floor below us, a feeling quite rewarding. As we were both used to worn-out carpets and concrete basements throughout our lives, the ceiling was at a pretty high altitude, an easement of my claustrophobia. There was a fireplace stuck into the wall to the left of the room, mirroring the warmness of its instance. Spiraling stairs led up to the second floor, delivering a dramatic addition to the scene before us. There was, however, an even more elegant and interesting part, unparalleled to the rest of the house. It was the wallpaper. Colored in black, gray, and white, the paper on the walls was obstructed by designs. In some areas, simplistic black lines danced just inches from the bottom of the wall. Around corners, the designs would change to outlines of various things like staircases and lamps. Unlike most wallpaper you'd see in a home, this house has a different look with every couple of steps taken, almost like its sole purpose was to be offbeat to the rhythm of the rest of the building. I'm sure some folks wouldn't be very fond of the look, but I found beauty within the artistic disruption. My partner mirrored my love for the place, bewildered as she turned around each and every corner. This, after all, was a much-needed change. She was still a little shaky from her divorce a couple of years back. Her past marriage had a wall, just as her abusive ex-husband often did. He was always unsupportive when it came to her art, not to mention violent whenever he drank. It was a refreshing sight to see her eyes widen above a gracious smile. With our new chapter coming to a start, we decided to get an early rest around 7 o'clock, right before nightfall. I was struck completely awake by a loud bang in the middle of the night. My caffeine manifested into a drum beat. My fiancé was still asleep, as being a deep sleeper rendered the noise ineffective. The bang was accompanied by soft, inaudible voices. These ambiguous communications eventually came to a halt, and were followed by the sounds of scratches, reminiscent of a cat clawing at the walls. I contemplated my choices, but ultimately decided to cautiously search my new place of residence, just in case someone had broken in. Being a new neighbor might have meant that we were fresh target practice for burglars in the area. Exploring, to my dismay, it left me with more questions rather than answers. Exiting the doorway to my bedroom, I kept as silent as humanly possible, so as to not alarm the potential intruders. I wasn't armed, but vulnerability didn't shake me as much as my curiosity or the vibration of the initial thump. Suddenly I spotted something that sent chills through my body. What caught my eye as I turned my head made me blink more than once. You might think me insane, but I swear I saw something behind the wallpaper. Something behind the wallpaper move. A mini silhouette that seemed in sync with the black lines embedded in the paper covering the wall. The figure ran across, escaping around the corner. It'd be the first time I'd ever say this, but I followed the miniature person on the wall. Approaching the next hallway, things got even more peculiar. I swore I saw the human in the wall pop out into the hallway and dash away. Immediately after this confusing occurrence, the wallpaper turned yellow in color and became plain. Any designs disappeared as if someone freshly painted over both sides. Overtiredness was what my mind deemed an answer to all this chaos, trying to conjure up some comfort and at least delay the perplexity. I made my way back up to bed. I fell asleep, convinced that I sleptwalked. I must have dreamt up my adventure. The morning after, waking up was not so easy. I only got a few hours of sleep before my lovely lady woke me up with a smile brighter than the sun, shaking me like an earthquake and holding out an odd-looking marker in her hand. She stared at me with a grin, saying, "You're the sweetest man I've ever made contact with. The love of my life. You made my heart melt with the words you spoke to me in the middle of the night last night." And gave me an everlasting kiss. Now this had me quite baffled. "What do you mean?" I asked. "How silly of you," she exclaimed. "You know you handed me this marker and told me you wanted to be with me forever, welcoming into your home. You then proceeded to reassure me that nothing, not even the walls, could come between us. So wonderful and cute to hear." Obviously, all this puzzled me beyond belief. I knew for a fact I wasn't even in the bedroom most of the night. Never mind even speaking a word to her. She was passed out. Instead of trying to explain what was on my mind, I looked her in her brown, sparkling eyes and responded, "Oh, yeah, of course, my apologies. Still half asleep. I love you so much." Hopping out of bed, still a little shaken, took a few steps towards the door. "Now I'm gonna make us some delectable breakfasts. Some of your favorite, bacon and eggs." I proceeded to leave the room. "Okay. I'm gonna sit here and draw you, and with this, a symbol of our new life together." She smiled, gesturing towards the marker in her hand. "Just let me know when the food is ready."
Hi, moms. My twin girls, Siobhan and Sharon, are spending a lot of time together. They've always been really close, but it seems like they've really gravitated towards one another since they started getting their grown-up teeth. I tried looking to see if Dr. Wheeler's website had any info about this, and there wasn't much. Does anyone else have experience with this? Hi, moms. I wrote the other day about my little Siobhan and Sharon, who've been spending what I feel is too much time together. I think it's gotten worse. Now they cry when I separate them. I don't want to make my girls upset, but they even insist on sleeping in the same bed and going to the bathroom together. I homeschool, of course. I've read too many scary stories about vaccine and vaccine reactions that makes me want nothing to do with Vaxxer kids. But I'm worried that's making them get more dependent on one another since they're in the house all day. By the way, I wanted to thank the mommy who replied last time with the recommendation to use that special root extract on the girls' loose teeth. I was able to find the root in the backyard and it's helped a lot with the inflammation and pain. Hey, fellow moms. It's the old lady who was worried about her twins being codependent. Well, they're still inseparable, but they're less moody about it. No crying or screaming or anything. I was racking my brain to figure out why they were like that in the first place, and I was thinking it was because their stupid, deadbeat dad walked out on them. Does that make sense? I'm still using the root extract on their gums, and they haven't complained about loose tooth pain in a while, so I really do recommend it to everyone. God knows it's worth a try, since it's natural and won't cause anything like autism or any of the other vaccine reactions. As sort of an aside, do any of you other mommies see angels? I know it sounds silly, but my guardian angel watches over me and my girls. He's beautiful. Woo! Wow, that last one got a lot of attention. Don't worry, moms. I want to address the concern of mommy_32114 directly. I promise he's a good angel. All he does is tell me about things that'll help with the girls or make me feel better when I'm sad, or reveals the natural stuff in the yard or forest. He is more like a New Testament angel than a vengeful Old Testament one. Back on topic of the twins. The girls are the same. I gotta admit, it was pretty cute this morning when I walked in on the girls sleeping and Sharon had her mouth open and Siobhan had her lips in there like she was a bird. They've never done that before. I'll try to take a picture next time if I find them like that again. Now when mommy makes a promise, she delivers. Look how cute they are. Sorry about the messy bedroom. That time it was Sharon's lips in Siobhan's mouth when they slept. They cried when I woke them up, and both their gums were bleeding a little this morning, so I made a point to dig up some more of the root to soothe them. It just occurred to me today, but does anyone know if the root extract interacts with the ingredients with the Flower Power, Immune Boost, and Brain Master supplements that Dr. Wheeler sells on his website? I've been giving the girls triple doses of those 3 for the last 2 years to give them the leg up on all the kids in public school. It's bad enough that the tests are biased towards the kids who get indoctrinated in those factory schools. I don't want my girls to fall behind. The deck's stacked against all of us woke mommies. I'm gonna go give the girls a bath. They're super sticky for some reason. I bet they got into the sweets again. Okay, moms. I don't want to sound like one of those Bible thumper ladies, but I really want to talk to you about the angels. I think it's so important that all of you believe in them. Without a guardian angel, I would have no support in this world. It's a really dark place. My girls are good, don't get me wrong, but they're still babies. They don't know anything. My angel visited me overnight and helped me feel like a woman again. You know what I mean? And I'm sorry if that's smutty to some of you. I don't mean to cause any offense. Afterward, he told me about how I needed to nurture my girls even more. I'd been neglecting their care even when I thought I was doing my best. With my angel watching over me and making sure I didn't do anything wrong, I took out the rest of their baby teeth. I gave them extra big doses of Dr. Wheeler supplements and gave them pieces of roots to chew. They never cried, and they never protested. They just sat on the kitchen chairs and stared at each other, holding hands. They hold hands all the time now. I barely notice them sleeping with their lips in each other's mouths anymore. I need to find a lock for the sweets cabinet, though, because they're always sticky. Wow! I got a lot of private messages from you folks overnight. Don't worry. Seriously. My girls are just fine, and my angel is there all the time now, so it's like there's a daddy in the picture again. No, the girls can't see him, but he talks through me, and he's so supportive. There's one problem I want to talk about, so I hope some of you ruder moms keep your opinions to yourself and let the helpful ones offer advice. You know how the girls are sleeping with their mouths sort of inside one another? It was hard to get them apart today. It was like something was connecting them. And when I saw inside of their mouths, it was like there was these red strings connecting them at the holes in their gums. The strings came apart pretty easy and there was a little blood, but they seemed no worse for wear. Aside from their stickiness, of course. Even after I give them their baths, they're still so sticky. It's not bad when I touch them or when I take off their clothes, but when they hold hands, it's darn near impossible to pull them apart without leaving bruises. I know there's a few moms here who have vaccinated their kids before they knew about all the bad vaccine reactions, so I need to ask, did any of these things happen to your children? I've heard vaccines can travel through the air sometimes, and I'm really scared the girls might have picked something up when we went to the store. Problem solved, moms. Boy, oh boy, has this been a whole big to-do over nothing. First of all, I want to offer a big thank you to all the moms who helped me out over these last couple of weeks. Thank you for not judging me, and thank you for understanding what I was going through. So, here's your last update. It has nothing to do with the bad vaccine reactions from the airborne vaccinations. I wish I had gotten that in my head over these last few days, but at least it's been eliminated as a possibility. Here's the thing. There was never anything wrong with the girls in the first place. When my angel told me this morning, it took some time for me to be convinced, but it made so much more sense once it sunk in. Remember, my girls are twins. They came from the same egg and everything, and that egg came from me, their loving mommy. Well, it was divine intervention that I used all those supplements from Dr. Wheeler and the root from the yard. It's all helping bring my girls together. Really, together. Just like they were before they were born. I've stopped pulling them apart. They're still in bed, but they're wide awake and they got big smiles, even though their mouths are wide open. Those red strings have gotten thicker and darker and have little veins running through them. I don't think I could pull them apart if I wanted to. They're meant to be back together. Joined. That's right. Combination of natural supplements is what did it. Sharon and Siobhan are going to be one big girl, not two little ones. I think twins are just another thing that nature didn't intend to happen, and now it's all getting fixed. Even now, I can hear the sound of them combining in the other room. There was a weird wet sound about an hour ago that spooked me, but when I ran in to see what was happening, it was just their soft little bellies opening up and the parts inside joining together. I'm not looking forward to cleaning that bedspread once they're done with it. But I'm so excited my girls are growing up right. It's one of those things that makes a mommy proud.